Welcome to the Sedona Soul Sisters show, down to earth discussions on metaphysics, spirituality, paranormal, and healing topics. Today's topic is connecting with your higher self and your human self. It's kind of misleading because truly our higher self is always connected to our human self. We come into this life with it. But I think we should talk about what is a higher self, before we get into this. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Terri Ann?
Sure. And we can go into a little bit of how I view it. If you think of your higher self as your upper chakras, I like to view it as that. So it sort of separates it a little bit, right?
The
And
ones
then,
that are above your actual head.
yeah, from your eyebrows above your head. And then if you think about your heart as your soul's will, like, living from your heart-based center. And then I look at the lower chakras as your ego self, right? And so we try to live somewhere in the middle as our higher self, our soul's will, like our heart-based thinking. But we do fall in between, right? We go from lower self, ego, to higher self thinking. And we fluctuate back and forth. And as we're on our spiritual progression, our path, we strive to live more from that higher perspective of thinking. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
I mean, most people don't even, I shouldn't say most people, many people never even think about the fact that they have a higher self. But it really is also called your divine self, is another way to put it. But it's always been aware and it's been thinking in the background as you live your life here on this plane of existence. But it really is the higher part of yourself. It's the part of you that goes onward lifetime to lifetime. And I really like to think of it as the part of us that connects the human to the divine, really the human to who we are on the other side as light beings, as pure light. So it's just really about tapping into that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's your favorite way to do that? Or let's start with, why would you want to do that? Like what good comes out of that? I don't want to forget to talk about that.
Right. Well, think about it, because when we're living from a lower base frequency and living from our ego, the ego is all about self, right? The ego is about survival and feeling good and all of those things. And when we begin to live from a higher base thinking, that divine thinking, we start to view the world a little bit differently. So for me, a lot of things I like to connect to divine, easily through my meditation. And I started with easily just doing meditation just for relaxation purposes. And I found that through that, I was able to connect clearer with my higher self.
I think that some of the things that people can look forward to, why some benefits of consciously connecting to your higher self, is getting more guidance, feeling peace, harmony. And I think just really tapping into that knowledge that you carry from the other side, from your past lives. And it also helps you turn away more easily from distractions of the physical world. And right now, there's so much going on that's harsh and low frequency and highly distracting. So if you want to restore yourself in light, love, power of your eternal self, then this is a great thing to do. So it's part of a spiritual journey. Your divine self, your higher self is so wise. Just having that knowledge alone, I think, would be very amazing to make it all worthwhile. Do you think you have to consciously do this?
No, I think your higher self is always involved. I think our human self gets in the way.
I totally agree with that.
Right?
Totally.
Because think about it, we're always like, especially in the beginning when we're learning this path, did I really hear that? Did I really see that? Am I crazy? Am I losing my mind? Our higher self is always communicating with us, but as humans, we make it so much more difficult than it needs to be. So I believe absolutely our higher self is always striving. I mean, that's my understanding of why your soul comes here. It comes to learn, grow, and evolve. And over this time, while it's here in this person, say Terri Ann, Terri Ann has her own ideas, what she wants to do and where she wants to go and how she wants to do it. And the higher self is guiding Terri Ann that way, but sometimes Terri Ann gets in the way of that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I know that's absolutely true. You know, it comes back to what we were talking about the other day with the overthinking things. So to me, like a first step with this, it comes back to something we talk about often, sitting quietly, you know, just a calm, quiet place to be in, setting intention that I'm going to connect with my higher self, open to it, and be just willing to fully receive all of that energy and anything that your higher self thinks you need in that moment. But silence is such a vital factor in that process, because the connection with our higher self goes beyond the mind and physical body. And I'm just going to say, you are not seeing me because my webcam driver went out in my laptop. So I got to get my computer guru involved in it. I've tried everything I could. So I'm sorry to be blackness on the screen, but that'll be rectified. And you know that just ridding yourself of as many distractions as you can. So, you know, try not to spend too much time watching TV or even listening to music. Alone time. I don't think alone time, being alone is not the same as being lonely. We can intentionally set aside alone time to connect with our higher self and many other things, connect with your angels, you know, but this is, I want to focus on the higher self today. But I think just because you maybe do this for a little bit and you don't consciously think you received anything, it's important you don't get discouraged, because this is a process and it's not going to, just like anything else, it's going to happen in divine time. You're suddenly going to realize you did receive something, and then you're going to be all excited, and it's because you've been working toward it, right?
Absolutely. I think again, that's where the ego comes in, right? So there's that lower base thinking again. Well, I didn't hear, see, feel, or see what this should look like, and it doesn't feel or I didn't hear it or see it how I think it should be. And so a lot of times we do get in the way with that lower based ego thinking. But the higher self is always, you have to trust that whatever you're getting at that time, and as your progression goes on, you can start to see a huge difference. I truly believe we go through these stages, right, of integration, and we come here to learn. So in that process, our frequency does tend to drop lower based on the things we're watching, the things we're eating, the people we're with. And as we always talk about how important frequency is. And as we raise our frequency, we start bringing in different experiences to our world, right? And so when you're higher frequency, yes, it's easier to connect, and you start to understand that maybe if you didn't feel like anything came in, it still came in, like when we talk about downloads or stuff like that.
Absolutely. And I know this kind of continuing with that whole theme of getting quiet is really trying to let go of thoughts. You know, we always have these things we have to do rolling around in our head, or worries about things and planning things. And it's really about consciously letting all of that go and just getting to a place where your mind is in inner stillness. So even if it's just for a moment, if you can do that, just let go of any thoughts about the outer world and just ask your higher self to draw you into itself. And I think you can do that by releasing thoughts or beliefs that could be an obstacle, like, I couldn't do this. My frequency isn't high enough. I haven't been on my spiritual journey long enough. I'm not special. Whatever the thoughts are that are getting in your way, you cannot tell yourself these negative things and expect to have success with this process, or at least it'll take longer, I would imagine.
Yeah, I heard something the other day. I was reading something and it said, if you believe yourself to be fat, how can you really be skinny? And I was like, wow, like that's so, in that little sentence, it's so profound, because it's true, right? If I'm going around all day saying I'm fat, I'm never going to be skinny. Even if I was skinny, I will never be skinny, because I don't believe that I am.
I think that pertains to this, and not just trying to connect with your higher self, but anything else you're trying to break through barriers and accomplish skills and abilities, like really tapping into your ability. This is a new ability. You know, we all have the higher self there. It's part of us, but tapping into it, connecting to it, you have to decide you want to do that. I really think it can happen automatically, but it's more likely to happen just by deciding you're going to do it and working at it. And I don't want to say working at it. That makes it seem like you can push your way through it. Letting it happen, but letting it happen on a regular basis. How's that? Making a habitual practice of these things.
Yeah, and the higher self exists without worry or limitations. So your higher self doesn't have those limitations. Your higher self isn't saying, I can't connect with you. That's you, as your lower self, is thinking you can't connect with your higher self. So the higher self, none of that exists for the higher self.
That's for sure. I want to be my higher self when I grow up. I like to speak to my higher self. Am I the only one in the group who does that?
No.
You do? I talk to my higher self, and I think that that's a good thing to do. I like to kind of think of it like they're a great friend of mine, and kind of like my angelic guides, my team, that they're always with me, because they are. And I just like to talk to them. And I don't literally hear them talking back, but I certainly feel it in moments. Like I can really feel like that connection. Like I feel the frequency rise, and it just feels like everything that I've been concerned about is gone, lifted. And I can see things, I guess, like better perspective, more objectively when I do that. And I like that, you know, because it's easy to get caught up in emotions, especially as an empath. I can be tsunami by emotions pretty regularly. So anything that pulls me out of that makes me happy. And you can ask guidance of your higher self. I mean, that's another reason I talk to them. Do you do that, Terri Ann?
Yes, very much so. Especially when things aren't as I wish they should be, if I'm having an overly difficult time. When we talk about shifting and going through shifts, and I've gone through a huge integration process over the last few years, and it's been very difficult. So I've always asked for help in helping me process what's going on at the time. And my higher self never fails me. The higher self will come in, and these thoughts or something will pop in my head all of a sudden, something I need to do, or a crystal I need to get, or an oil I need to use. And I always find that it's so perfect in the timing that it comes in, and it makes perfect sense.
Roz, you want to say something?
Well, I think that one thing that makes it difficult for people to connect with their higher self is that, we have this level of subconscious consciousness, which is the higher self, that's running all the time. And I always think of that as being like a connection, as if I were a radio with an antenna. And so that is always pulling in information. But one of the things that happened to me, and I'm totally relating, like in my 20s, I had to have this sort of conversation with my very logical, analytical self, and remind that aspect of myself that it has to put itself almost to sleep sometimes. And that was in the context of doing readings. And what I became aware of is my higher consciousness, when I was doing readings, started when I was in my mid-20s to late 20s. I suddenly became aware that I was sitting in my chair and I was talking to people, but my higher consciousness was up about 3 feet, looking at the room and seeing the room from the perspective of that elevated altitude, if you want to call it that. And it was a really very kind of like awakening moment for me when I thought, okay, there are two me's here. There are two aspects of my, whatever my ability is, that are running concurrently. And I have to turn off the logical, analytical side and turn on that other side to really fully access it. And that was kind of a very mind-blowing time for me. I started to realize that, like, when I do out of body things and different things that are happening and going on, that is that higher consciousness, that my higher consciousness is always in that frequency. But, as Terri Ann said, the Roz part, the human part, is not always in that highest frequency. That's where I have to strive. So I think if you kind of allow yourself to realize that these are multiple dimensions of us, and we have those multiple dimensions, just like we're dealing with multiple dimensions. And knowing that, realizing that, getting comfortable with the fact that your higher consciousness is fully aware at all times and fully present. It's just sitting 3 feet up or whatever. So it was a process for me to get to that point, and also to realize that I could turn these various aspects of my abilities off and on. And that made things a lot easier. It's very weird, but it's something that from my late 20s on, things began a big shift for me.
I love that. I love you had that experience, Roz.